Welcome back to Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Landis, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. I'm glad to be back after our brief hiatus, and I'm excited to talk about some ball.
We are going to talk about some ball today. We have three things on the agenda. We have an interview with PJ Fleck, the Minnesota head coach. Excited to give you guys that. We're going to talk a little bit at the end of the show about the Nico Iamaleava stuff. Gosh, here we were. It was not that long ago, Bill, that we were trying to figure out. We were double-checking pronunciations because Tennessee was playing Ohio State in the playoff, and now we're double-checking pronunciations because maybe college football is exploding. Iamaleava, right? I just asked you before the show, and I'm asking you again.
Yeah. You got it.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to talk about that at the end of the show. But the first thing, we know there were a bunch of spring games over the weekend. Ohio State, Notre Dame, Kansas wrapped up. But we wanted to dive in on a particular thing, spurred in part by some of the things that happened. For instance, Mylan Graham having a huge spring game for Ohio State and perhaps emerging as like the next Ohio State receiver that everybody's going to talk about. But we talked about this on a previous show, Bill, about is Ohio State's receiver recruiting and development maybe one of the best things in college football? And we thought, does that mean we should do a show about like what are the best things in college football? And instead, we decided to dive into this particular aspect of this particular team in pursuit of something, which I think is it replicable for other teams? Like, how do these guys do this? How does Ohio State recruit and develop receivers at the highest level as seen by their production in college and what they go on to do in the NFL draft? And then, like, what does that mean for them as a team? What can other teams learn from that? What does receiver recruiting and development mean for any team that wants to be great? And so we dove in, man, and that's what we're going to do here.
Yeah, I would say this, like you said, might Ohio State's receiver recruiting and development be one of the best things? It unequivocally is one of the best things. It's like,
yes.
Can you quantify it as the best thing? I think it's a little more difficult, and I don't know that's really what we set out to do here, because in looking some stuff up, it was obvious that there are some other schools and positions that I think are come close that certainly are respectable in comparison to what Ohio State has done at receiver, but if you really dig into it, it's not that hard to convince yourself that Ohio State and receivers is the best thing going in college football right now. So we wanted to explore that a little more.
Yeah, we want to find out. We're talking about some other teams. Like you look at what Syracuse did throwing the ball last year. You look at what Iowa State did throwing the ball last year. You look at what Washington did 2 seasons ago in making the national title game, right? Like we see teams. I even think that you can talk about, for instance, there were a lot of questions, I think, around both the Notre Dame receivers and Penn State receivers going in to the playoff. And I think Notre Dame got a kind of boost in receiver production that maybe Penn State didn't. And you saw some guys like Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison emerge for Notre Dame in a way that I think mattered. And I think we're trying to figure out also, like, of all the things that you can do, like, is receiver recruiting and development a thing that any great team should be laser focused on, or is it just one piece of the puzzle?
And my view on that has changed, so I'm excited to talk about that. We can when we get to the point where we talk about whether or not it matters receivers win. I'll share a story about how just off base I was with that a couple of years ago as it related to Ohio State. But I do think there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of evidence over these last couple of years, with one notable exception we'll talk about, that it matters tremendously. It matters probably more than it's ever mattered in college football, and Ohio State is doing it better than anyone.
Yeah. So we will tell you that we are just going to do, like, we want to dive in on some stuff on this show. And so you can see we've kind of revamped our graphic package a little bit. So if you're listening on a podcast, you can't see that, but anybody here live on YouTube, watching back on YouTube, we feel like we've enhanced our look a little bit. I did get a little different deal with my lighting and my camera. We feel like we've enhanced that look a little bit, and we took last week off. And so there's 2 things I want to say just very quickly about, like, what we're doing here and why we're doing it. One is that we are just continually grateful for anybody who makes this show part of their college football fan experience. Our number one goal always is for us to be one little drip in the ocean of Northern college football fandom, and to try to help in any way you guys enjoy your teams more. So we are grateful that you are here. And then 2 is we want to give you the best show that we can give you. So along those lines, the only announcement that I have, Bill, is that I have decided, after perusing some other shows out there, we didn't do shows last week, so we had time. We worked on this stuff, like we worked on elevating our show. And I was checking in. We checked in. We just got a lay of the land, right? Looked at the landscape. I'm going to screech 25% less. It is a decision I have made. I have observed other things, and I want to save my screeching for when it really matters. So I think generic screeching as a way of engaging an audience might be out for me. But like dog mentality screeching, then when I screech, when I do that, when I get that with the dog mentality, I think it's going to hit even harder. But I don't just want to come on and start screeching right away. And I think at times I have. And I think having, again, perused other shows, I'm not sure I like it.
Should I screech more to balance it out?
I
actually don't even know. I don't know if screeching is in my register, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. That'll be a separate show. That's like a June show. It's like, can Bill screech? So yeah. So that is so, but again, like this is all in service of one thing, which is giving you the best, most interesting, unique, enticing, fun, intelligent college football conversation about Northern college football that we possibly can do. And we will continue to do that as long as we believe we have the capacity to fulfill that mission. And the day that we feel like, you know what, we can't do it, then we won't do it anymore. But for now, like, we're fired up to do it. Right? Okay.
Fired up. Yeah. Fired up enough to screech almost.
Yeah. Let's talk about recruiting a position group and what we can learn from what Ohio State has done. Bill, you did a lot of the research for this show. And one of the things is you kind of looked at the last 6 years, which is since Brian Hartline, the recruiting classes where he kind of dove in full bore as the full Ohio State receivers coach, and which groups have signed, which teams at which position groups have signed the most top 10 players at that position of anybody in the country. And Ohio State receivers, they do separate themselves, but they're not alone. Explain this.
They're not alone. And what kind of really spurred this on is we were talking about Chris Henry Jr. in the class of 2026 2 weeks ago, announcing that he was going to stick with his commitment to Ohio State. And at that time, I said, he's the number 2 receiver in the class currently. He might end up being the number 1 receiver. And if he does, he would be the 4th number 1 overall receiver that Brian Hartline has signed in, I guess, would then be 7 recruiting classes as Ohio State's receivers coach, which seems kind of bonkers. So I wanted to try to find a way to quantify this a little bit. I like that. Listen, the qualitative analysis is just as interesting, and we'll do some of that too. But I like trying to put some numbers behind some things if we can. So what I did, as you said, I looked at the last 6 recruiting classes, top 10 players at each position group. I did combine offensive line into one thing. I combined defensive line into one thing. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there, I guess, if we really wanted to break it down. Ohio State has signed 10 top 10 receivers over that span, and that's pretty good. The only team that has signed more top 10 players from a specific position group over that span is Georgia, with linebackers at 11. But again, that's a little weird because it's off-ball linebacker, on-ball linebacker. Is this guy actually defensive end? I just went by as they were listed in the 24/7 Sports composite ratings. So there were 11 linebackers for Georgia who were among the top 10 players at their position from 2020 through the 2025 recruiting class that just signed. 10 Ohio State receivers, 10 Alabama offensive linemen, 10 Alabama defensive linemen, and 9 Alabama running backs. I don't think anyone's surprised to see the logos of these particular teams here. We're talking about something like this, but I thought the context of exactly how good Ohio State's receiver recruiting has been, especially sort of the cream of the crop at the position, was important as a jumping off point to this conversation.
Yeah. So I do think, and this is one of these again where part of it is what have you done, but also what can you continue to do? And so I don't know, we don't wipe it away, but this is Saban. These are Saban numbers here. And part of the thing that we're going to be talking about a lot with Ohio State and that teams I think want to pursue is continuity, is when you get to the highest level, can you stay at the highest level? I'm not sure that Alabama offensive line recruiting, defensive line recruiting, and running back recruiting, I'm not sure that matters to me now that Kalen DeBoer is the head coach of Alabama. Does this tell us anything about what we expect Bama to do? It's not like their recruiting has fallen off a cliff.
No,
but Nick Saban's gone.
It's a point worth making, and probably having sort of in your back pocket as we continue to evaluate what Kalen DeBoer is going to do at Alabama. But the one thing I'll say is this, right? Especially the defensive line, So there's 10 over a 6-year period here for Alabama, but they have not signed a top 10 defensive lineman in either of the last 2 cycles.
Okay.
So it's all Saban. And like
It's
even
all
the
in
end
the
of
past
Saban
already.
the end of Saban didn't get it, and the first class for Kalen DeBoer didn't get there. Now they maybe they'll sign 3 in 2026. Like it's sort of it's an unfinished data set now that we're trying to examine there. But yeah, there's that little asterisk there with Alabama in particular. I think the other positions, even the Alabama ones, have remained a little bit more consistent than the Alabama defensive line recruiting, but we'll have to see what that all looks like as, they cycle through Nick Saban on into Kalen DeBoer's recruiting.
And John's making a point in here, right? Like you look at something like the Michigan defensive line compared to something like the Alabama defensive line. We're trying to do both things here, which is an input and an output, which is recruiting and then the development part when you get to the NFL draft. We'll try to do, I think there's some more things we can look into as we get to the NFL draft in 10 days. But this is more of an input thing. And so
yes, I've done that in the past. Like I've looked at like which programs do the best job of turning 3-star recruits into guys who were drafted in the first 3 rounds. We can definitely do some of that stuff.
Yeah. So, and we will continue to look at that. So anyway, I think what we're trying to establish here in diving into this, we want to kind of deal with like the what, and then like the how, and then like the why, or why does it matter? Right. So we're still on the what of this. Let's talk about a little bit of that development then the NFL draft. So you're talking about, and do you want to run through? Do you think people want the names, the 10 guys? Did you write them down? It's your research.
The 10 Ohio State guys?
The 10 Ohio State guys who have been, I have it here too, because you did like most of the research. So I just jumped in off the top rope and at it a little bit. Yeah.
So the 10 players who were ranked top 10 at their position who have signed Ohio State receivers.
By the 24/7 composite ratings, right?
Yes. So in 2020, there were 3 of them: Julian Fleming, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and G. Scott Jr., who eventually became a tight end at Ohio State. In 2021, it was Emeka Egbuka, who was the number 1 receiver in the class. None in 2022. In 2023, there was Brandon Inniss and Noah Rogers and Carnell Tate. Inniss and Tate still on the roster. Noah Rogers has transferred to NC State. 2024, a guy by the name of Jeremiah Smith was the number 1 overall player in that class, and also Mylan Graham, who you mentioned earlier, was number 7 in the class of 2024. And then, like, the one that really flew under the radar was in this most recent recruiting class was Quincy Porter, who was the number 5 overall receiver and a 5-star prospect. And I guess Ohio State does it so often that there wasn't a whole lot of fanfare with the Quincy Porter edition, but it turns out he might be pretty good based off what he's doing this spring too. So those are the 10.
And again, like a guy like Mylan Graham, who did not early enroll last year, got overshadowed by Jeremiah Smith, and then had 100 yards in Ohio State spring game on Saturday. It's like, okay, like this is a reminder of this. Those 10 you mentioned, the only guy who really was not a factor at all for Ohio State is Noah Rogers, who very quickly transferred to North Carolina State. Everybody else has been something between a star and a pretty solid contributor, guys like G. Scott or Julian Fleming or people like that. And then like Egbuka and Jackson Smith-Njigba and Jeremiah Smith at the top level. And by the way, Marvin Harrison Jr. not in this list because he was not a top 10 receiver at his position. He was more like 13th or 14th. So he gets left off.
14th. Yeah, he was number 14, number 97 overall, number 14 receiver in the 2021 class.
And I will say one of the things that happened here is we talk about the Hartline and Day thing specifically. And again, this is going to be the things that teams can replicate a little bit. Is Ohio State was in a pretty decent spot to begin with before all this. That when Zach Smith was the Ohio State receivers coach, he did a very solid job of recruiting. Garrett Wilson was kind of the start of this. That was actually kind of a crazy position. Ryan Day was kind of the guy who went in and saved the Garrett Wilson recruitment. When that happened, he was the number 2 receiver in the class of 2019. But guys like, Jamison Williams, who then transferred to Alabama, became a first-round pick, was in that class. but they had some guys who were more like 8, 10, 12, 15th in their position before this, and then Hartline elevated it. Okay.
Chris Olave was a 3-star, almost a 3-star. Yeah.
Yeah. NFL draft. You're talking about these groups. And so now you kind of wanted to look at the groups that recruited at the highest level and position groups and then how they did in the NFL draft. And again, we're talking about Ohio State has had this run of first-round guys. They've had 4 first-round receivers in the last 3 years. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson in 22, Jackson Smith-Njigba in 23, Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. Now you expect Emeka Egbuka to do it this year. How does that compare?
Yeah, and these aren't exactly the same data sets. I think people know that, right? Like I looked at the last 4 NFL drafts, and those classes don't include some of these guys who were recruited because some of them are still in college. So the last 4 drafts, as you mentioned, Ohio State has 4 picks total at the receiver position. All first rounders. The average draft position of those 4 is 11.3. So it's like almost a top 10 pick, which I think is the separator here when you compare it to other groups. But among those positions we listed earlier, like they're pretty good. Alabama offensive linemen in the last 4 drafts, 6 picks, an average of 48.1. So that's a second round pick average. 3 first rounders. They're going to have another one in this coming draft with Tyler Booker. And then Georgia linebackers, again, I just sort of went by the position designation according to the NFL. I realized some of these guys are more maybe like edge players, but there have been 6 draft picks, 63.2 average, so an average third round pick, 2 first rounders, and Jalen Walker will be a first round pick this year. So more total picks among Alabama offensive linemen and Georgia linebackers, but a far, far, far better average for Ohio State receivers at 11.3.
Yeah. So input good, output good, and rare. Yeah. In rare territory here. And by the way, I don't know, in all your research, do you know before Olave and Wilson went in the first round in 2022, do you know how many years it had been since Ohio State had a first round pick at receiver?
Was it David Boston?
Ted Ginn Jr. and Anthony Gonzalez in 2007. Yeah. So 14 years. Yeah. So this is also like a thing, they had Michael Thomas was a second round pick. Terry McLaurin, who's become an NFL superstar, was a third round pick. Devin Smith was a second round pick. So they had Brian Hartline was a fourth round pick. They had some guys, but this also kind of exploded out of nowhere, which is an interesting thing, which again, I think Ohio State has completely changed its identity under Ryan Day when it comes to like this offensive style, obviously throwing the ball. There are lessons here, I think, learned for other schools about what your head coach can and can't do when he comes in new to a school that has a reputation and a tradition of doing something. And I feel like, Bill, we've mainly had this conversation of an identity shift in the North, primarily around what school in the past couple years? Wisconsin. And the failure of that. Right? I think this is a reminder of how it can succeed. And so I don't think a new head coach should be afraid of an identity shift if he really believes in his ability to get that done. Whether that's been a school that's won with defense and now you want to try to win with offense. And I will say this. I think the place that this potentially could apply the most in the future is Iowa. And so I will be very curious when Kirk Ferentz retires, if a school like Iowa will feel like it is wed to its identity. This is who we are. Now, we've been this for 25 years because that guy was in charge. But is that who you have to be? Or was that a singular coach's particular way of winning? And that Iowa should not be afraid of saying, we're going and getting a great offensive mind, and we're going to play in a completely different way. Now, your recruiting has to match your identity and has to match your strategy, right? That was kind of a thing at Ohio State with Jim Knowles. It's like, well, he wanted to do this, and Larry Johnson would say, like, we didn't recruit to that yet. It might take some time. Ohio State, I don't know if it's discussed this way because often Ohio State's like, well, Ohio State always has great players. They always compete at the top of the sport. This is a 180-degree identity shift that has proven successful. And for all the things Ohio State does well, receiver play is the driver. Passing game is the driver of their success, of their national title, right? How would you say it? Do you think it like the number one reason that Ohio State has been what it's been under Ryan Day? Is it receiver play? Is it receiver quarterback play? Is it passing game? Is it just offensive ingenuity and talent? What would you say?
I would probably say passing game to include receiver and quarterback together. Which I think raises another interesting point because I don't disagree with you that programs should be striving for this or like not be afraid of similar identity / philosophical shifts, but I do wonder if it has to be on the same side of the head coach's expertise for it to stick.
Which leads us into this next part, which is like kind of the continuity of this, because I do think it's impossible, and I think I've attempted to do this at times in the past. It's just a thing you do when you talk about sports, is you try to find the single reason. Talking about things in groups is boring, right? Just like, I want the thing, right? The thing, one thing. Tell me one thing. And it's like, well, there isn't one thing. So at times I've been curious, is it more Ryan Day and his offensive philosophy, or is it more Brian Hartline and his incredible ability to recruit and develop? And actually, it's, of course, both. But I think what is in common there is the continuity of play caller, offensive scheme, and then the coach in the room. And I do think that continuity to me maybe matters more than I realized, but it's not only receiver coach, it's offensive identity. And we're going to make a comparison between what Ohio State has done successfully in receiver recruiting and what Penn State has struggled with. And I think it's the lack of continuity and identity for Penn State's offense that is the number one reason Penn State's had trouble at the same thing Ohio State's done best.
Yeah, I think Ohio State has had the quote unquote Ryan Day offense
Yes.
for 8 years, right?
Yes.
That's
incredible.
that is like almost unheard of continuity in college football in this day and age. Like there have been some long entrenched, I think, defensive philosophies at schools where head coaches have been there for 20 years or so. But with the way that coaches move around right now, like I think it's hard to find what Ohio State has with its offensive identity. And it's not so rigid that it doesn't take on slightly different shapes year to year. There have been years where Ohio State has really leaned into throwing the ball more, and years where it's been more balanced, and even years like in 2019 with Justin Fields, where it ran the ball significantly more than it threw the ball. But within all of that, there are concepts and I think like a way of doing business that people understand is sort of like the way that Ohio State goes about doing things. If you're a prospect looking at schools, there's no confusion, I think, about what you're getting yourself into when it comes to Ohio State's offense. And I think there aren't a lot of places that can sell something similar, especially a place like Penn State that we're going to compare it to.
There was a time, like certainly when Lincoln Riley was hired originally at Oklahoma, when Ryan Day was hired at Ohio State, that it felt like, man, if you're looking to hire a head coach, offensive mind, who is going to continue to drive your program now as the head coach through an offensive philosophy, it was hard to think that anything other than that was the way to go. That's if I was an AD, that's where I'm going. I think we then have shifted away from that a little bit. But wasn't there a time wasn't there, I don't know, 6-8 years ago, it felt like that was the place to be. That's what everybody wanted. The new offensive mind on the scene. Give me that as my head coach.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The NFL still does that.
And I feel like there's a part of it that I think it dulled a little bit of like, okay, do you just want the shiny new thing because everybody likes offense and the president of the university and the donors like offense and the AD likes offense and the fans like offense? And like maybe that part of it is like, well, is that really how you win? And then you see what Kirby Smart does at Georgia as a defensive-minded head coach. You see what Marcus Freeman does at Notre Dame as a defensive-minded head coach. But I think the thing that remains true is the continuity of a side of the ball where there is a particular philosophy and way of going about things that is defining and not contingent on a coordinator. It's hard not to have that. Now, it doesn't have to be offense. Kirby Smart's going to play defense the way he's going to play defense. Nick Saban was going to play defense the way he was going to play defense. Marcus Freeman's going to do a particular style of things. Yes, Al Golden did a great job as a coordinator, but I don't know that anybody at Notre Dame is being like, well, that's it. Notre Dame can't play defense anymore because Al Golden left. Could you think to yourself, no, we know what we want to be because Marcus Freeman is a defensive-minded head coach. Certainly at Ohio State, like Jim Knowles leaves, it's like, okay, like this is a bigger deal. Whereas the offensive side of the ball, there's something there. That continuity of thought is what matters more than the shiny new, oh, isn't it cool to have like a schemer as your head coach? But it, especially like for this kind of thing, the continuity of the day offense is so integral to what everything has been.
I think it's the most important thing, like looking through all of this. And we'll talk a little more about offensive styles and if there's any correlation there. But I continuity of thought, I think, is the right way to put it. Like part of it too is like I think there's a continuity of thought. There's a clear sort of offensive infrastructure that more or less like whatever you lean into is going to come from kind of these core concepts. But I also think it is malleable to different skill sets too. Like there's not a hyper specificity when it comes to the types of players you need other than them being really good. But like you think of some of the more like gimmicky, I don't even want to call them gimmicky, just like different offenses, right? Like you're running the triple option offense. There's a very specific type of player you need to run that. You want to run a Rich Rodriguez kind of option offense. You know what you need a quarterback there. You can't just put any quarterback in that offense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as long as like with Ohio State, as long as like the baseline talent level is there, you can kind of come in all different shapes and sizes and fit into what Ohio State wants to do offensively, which I think helps them too.
For instance, since Ryan Day took over as the offensive coordinator at Ohio State in 2017, and again, like, yes, Chip Kelly was the offensive coordinator last year. Yes, Brian Hartline is now going to be the play caller, but it's still the way that Ryan Day wants to play offense. And it's funny how it goes. When Ryan Day got here, Urban Meyer was very much in like, hey, Ryan Day is going to call the Ohio State offense. But then actually he didn't, because they completely went to a more of a passing game than they were in 2016. And their quarterback was not a run threat in the same way. And it really took Urban Meyer like a full season, I think, to kind of become comfortable with that. So Ryan Day did change the way Ohio State played offense. I don't think that they're going to change. They're not going to change the way they play offense this year because Brian Hartline is a play caller. So anyway, since 2017, Ohio State has played offense the way Ryan Day wants to. Penn State, in comparison, and this is just the comparison we're going to make to illustrate the point, they've had 5 offensive coordinators since then. And I don't think there is the same similar. Yes, James Franklin came from the offensive side of the ball, but there's not a James Franklin way of playing offense in the same way. So Penn State's gone through 5 offensive coordinators and 5 different receiver coaches. And I think as a result, they've been searching for it. Now, Andy Kotelnicki, I think he is the answer. But it will be very interesting if and when Andy Kotelnicki leaves to be a head coach. What is going to happen to Penn State's offensive identity then as it relates to talent acquisition and talent development and also scheming it up? Because I don't know how this could be a permanent solution unless you get a Kotelnicki acolyte to run this same kind of offense when Kotelnicki moves on. But Joe Moorhead to Ricky Ronnie to Kirk Shiraka for a year to Mike Yurcich, who got fired at the end of year 3, to Andy Kotelnicki. And then, like, of course, they've also they fired Taylor Stubblefield as the receivers coach a couple years ago. Marcus Hagans is going to be entering year 3 in 2025. But how can a receivers coach get anything done when you're not even sure what you're selling to receivers in recruiting? So I think at times maybe we've blamed the receivers coach at Penn State, and I don't think it's that. And I don't know that I'm blaming James Franklin. It's just been a reality of the situation. You can't keep somebody around if they're not good. But they've been, I think, kind of lost since Joe Moorhead left. And so what would that, and I think, and then that is also part of, I mean, because they had some receivers when Joe Moorhead was there, right? Chris Godwin was there. So it's like, what happened? We're having a specific receiver discussion, but it's the overall offensive core that you're lacking that affects this.
Yeah, and Penn State did have it pretty good for like maybe it was a year or 2 years. So they had Joe Moorhead and Josh Gaddis. It's like, okay,
Yes.
like this seems to be working pretty well. And then they lost both and couldn't replace either, which is not exactly where you want to be. But no, I think that's been Penn State's biggest issue. Like, and I think we talked about this, like even through multiple defensive coordinators at Penn State, you more or less have an image in your mind of like what the Penn State defense is, but you do not have that with offense. And then there's just a trickle down effect there. It impacts quarterback recruiting, which I think they've done a better job of. Obviously, Drew Aller, and they've kind of stacked that room behind him a little better, and that goes hand in hand with receivers. I think we all understand that, but the more philosophical identity conversations, I think, is what Penn State really needs to get ironed out and consistent for this to turn the corner. It's very strange to have an offensive minded head coach with the receiver specialty, and you still can't quite get it figured out. And I do think it has held Penn State back quite a bit over the last couple of years, the inability to get that right.
But you know who also falls into that category is Dabo Swinney, who is a receivers coach. And as the head coach at Clemson, it certainly, I don't think, has been the same kind of like it's the Dabo offense. They went and hired Garrett Riley a couple years ago to like kind of come save them, right? Yep. And so we'll move on to the specificity of Brian Hartline. And there's a particular example here that I think we want to cite that you and I talked about the other day as we were kind of crafting this show. Like, what if this was certainly, I think, at least some component of the discussion around making Brian Hartline the play caller. Is he's been around long enough, he's been good enough at the job he had that it feels like he's in line for a promotion. Now, are you 100% sure that has that skill set to call plays just because he's a great recruiter and developer of receivers? Maybe, but it's not the exact same skill set. But is he so good at what he did before that you can't risk losing it? And part of me would have thought, I don't know that that's the reason to elevate a guy, and I don't think it was the reason he was made the play caller. Is because Ryan Day sees the other attributes are in him, and he's progressed in his contributions to the offensive philosophy the past couple of years. But Jeff Scott at Clemson had it going as a position coach, recruiting receivers, and he left to be the head coach at South Florida. And Clemson's receiver recruiting fell off a cliff.
It was bad for both sides. We were looking at Jeff Scott's Twitter account the other day trying to figure out what the heck he's doing now. He's not coaching.
He was like a financial advisor or something for a while. I was like, do you maybe have time to come on the show and talk about how because we talk about, everyone knows how Brent Venables, the defensive coordinator, opposite the expertise of Dabo Swinney, led that defense for a decade. And then, you lose him, you have to replace him. And at times they've struggled to do that. But it's interesting that on the same side of the ball as Sweeney's expertise, Jeff Scott really mattered. I was looking at a story about the recruitment of Sammy Watkins on tigernet.com from 2011. And they're talking about how Jeff Scott got down there and just was all over this recruitment and wouldn't give up and brought in Sammy Watkins. And then you look at T. Higgins and Mike Williams and all the receivers that Clemson has run through there, Justin Ross before his injury, and they haven't been the same since he left, Bill. And finding that example, it was like, well, Jeff Scott's good at it, but Clemson should be able to continue this. They didn't. And when you looked at Clemson the past couple of years, Cade Klubnik's good. You start going through, where's Clemson, the number one place they've lacked? And my friend Shahan Jeharaja was on this for years. It's receiver play. And it's you can point exactly to the guy in charge of that room leaving, what does that mean for Ohio State for the day if and when Brian Hartline moves on to be a head coach?
I think it just tells us that it's not, because my response to that sometimes has been just well, they'll be fine. It's Ohio State. It is. Everyone is replaceable as long as you replace them. Right. I think there's a lesson in there to maybe not be so, brazen in believing that. Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to fall off a cliff. And Clemson has gotten it back this year. You look at the receiver room right now; it's pretty good.
But they
with
took
Williams
3 or 4 years to get it back.
Yeah, and they did it with the 2 freshmen in last year's recruiting class that really bolstered the room, TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco. But it was a couple of years kind of in the wilderness figuring that out. And in doing so, Clemson, there are other reasons, I guess, but it's at least part of the reason why Clemson kind of fell out of the national title picture for a couple of years. And now that they have it reconfigured and where it should be, it's part of the reason why they're back in it going into this year. So I think it shows the importance of it. I think it shows how quickly it can get away from you if you're not diligent in trying to replace it, should the day come where Ohio State actually has to do that. Yeah.
Okay. So now the continuity of the individual position group. Receiver coaches can be a transient lot. I looked at the teams that finished in the top 25 of the AP poll last year after the season. I just went through how long their receivers coach has been at the school. There are only 4 of those top 25 where the receivers coach has been there for more than 5 years. Ohio State 8, BYU 8, and it's Fesi Sataki, who was the cousin of the head coach, practically a brother to the head coach because they kind of grew up together. Rare situation. Boise State is 6. Matt Miller is a former Boise State player who is there and has the roots like Hartline has. And actually Tyler Grisham, who at Clemson is his 6th year as the receivers coach at Clemson. He's been there since Jeff Scott left, but he's finally kind of getting it together because Dabo is loyal and Dabo doesn't move on from guys. So anyway, let me read you a quote about the best receiver in the past couple of years that BYU has recruited. It's a guy who's a true freshman this year. His name is Lampson Waller III. During his recruitment, he told On3, there's a good thing over there, and I want to be a part of it. And that was talking about the receiver play at BYU. Because you look at what Puka Nacua did at BYU after he transferred there. You look at what Chase Roberts has done. You look at Darius Laster, what he did as a transfer who came in there. my point to a quote like that is there's not a lot of position groups where a recruit even has a chance to say something like that.
Right.
You look at what they have going on there, because it's like, well, the head coach and the whole staff have only been there 2 or 3 years because everybody got wiped out. Or the receiver coach who was there, who's pretty good, left. Right now they had to hire somebody else. And I'll run through a couple of those. So I think like the continuity of the day offense, but just how rare it is that Brian Hartline is going into year 8 running Ohio State's receivers room. It is almost unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
And it is such an advantage. And I am on record saying that I think assistant coaches are replaceable. But I think, and again, then I have occasionally little caveats to that, right? But I think what maybe is my number one caveat now is when you have a long time established position coach who has set a standard, maybe that's not replaceable. If it's like, hey, you're a good school. There's a guy who was here for 3 years. Everybody thinks he's great. He left. Can you get another guy who's just as good? A lot of times, yes, if you're smart and you're willing to pay. But this Hartline thing, like, why are they so good at this? This is unusual, man, to have a guy stick around and run a room for almost a decade.
Yeah, and probably not replicable, I think, for a lot of places, right? Because of its rarity. And it's just it's such a strong sales point, for lack of a better term, for like even the kid you're talking about at BYU. It's like Puka Nacua becomes a star in the NFL. And it's not just like, oh, that guy came from BYU. Let me take a look at BYU. It's like, oh, the guy that coached him is still there. It's not like that is an extra degree that makes
extra degree.
But like Ohio State has that better than anybody, especially at this position, because you can go back, even like Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, whom you wouldn't give Brian Hartline a ton of credit for recruiting, because I think Zach Smith at the very least started those recruitments, and Ryan Day, I think, had a big hand in finishing them. Brian Hartline coached them. So like the draft data that I laid out didn't even include those guys, but you can add them to it and include them as guys who are developed by Brian Hartline. And it's just like Garrett Wilson's been in the league for 3 years now doing it. Same with Chris Olave. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a star. And it's one thing to say like, oh, those guys went to Ohio State. It's another thing to say that the guy who was instrumental in their development is still at Ohio State. Let me go play for that guy.
Yeah. You look at like other situations, for instance, Notre Dame, they have Mike Brown, who they hired from Wisconsin. He's entering year 2 at Notre Dame because they fired the previous guy because Marcus Freeman didn't like what was happening with Chancey Stuckey and moved on. Oregon just hired Ross Douglas from Syracuse because Junior Adams was so good in his 3 years there that the Dallas Cowboys took him. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. It's like, okay, now Oregon, all right, look at what Ted Johnson did. Hey, they got DeCorian Moore and Jalen McClellan to go there. But it's like the guy who did that was so good, he left. And that hasn't happened with Hartline at Ohio State because he's an Ohio State alum. He has roots. He has millions of dollars from the NFL. Maybe he doesn't have to chase the next job as much as a guy who doesn't have that kind of bankroll. And also, they've been smart and kept him happy. So not only that, Oregon loses their receivers coach, but also Ross Douglas did a great job. Fran Brown makes a great hire, and he's so good, he gets stolen by Oregon. So now Syracuse, which had a great passing game last year, Jackson Meeks, 1,000-yard receiver, has to go replace their receiver coach, right? Like, Bill, it is just this, the way that this happens is constant. Mike Shanahan, the offensive coordinator at Indiana, is also the receivers coach. If they can keep him around, he's been with Kurt Cignetti for a long time. Obviously, the whole staff is new at Indiana. I could see that being something there. And you looked at the way their receivers played last year. Can they keep Mike Shanahan around and make Indiana a place where receivers want to come play? And then one more I want to talk about. Nathan Shieldhouse was the receivers coach at Iowa State and did a great job. He was there for 5 or 6 years. Rams took him. He recruited Jalen Noel out of Kansas City. He was the big reason Jaden Higgins transferred from Eastern Kentucky to Iowa State. He got Xavier Hutchinson there. And so now Noah Pauley is going into his 3rd year as the Iowa State receivers coach. But a lot of what Iowa State just did with the past 2 seasons of Higgins and Noel, which was unbelievable and propelled Iowa State to the greatest season in program history. The singular coach who really made that happen is in the NFL. And now can Noah Pauley, I'm not saying he can't do it, but they also went in the portal to try to find a lot of answers at receiver. They didn't necessarily have a bunch of guys just ready to go to replace 2,000-yard receivers. It's really hard, Bill, to keep these guys around, which is such an inherent advantage. when guys like Fesi Sataki or Brian Hartline are trying to go out and sell something, because they have a history that very few receivers coaches have.
It feels borderline impossible to keep them around. No,
It does.
Like, I don't.
Yeah.
But my advice to anyone would be like, don't try to do this, because you can't.
You can't.
This is so rare and may not ever. It's lightning in a bottle to the most extreme degree. Like, all these things have aligned to create these perfect situations. That, like, you chase them, great. Aspire for them, awesome. Actually doing it, I think you're going to fall a few steps short at best case scenario because of how rare this is.
Guy I have my eye on, I'm curious about, is Hines Ward, who's going into his second year as the receivers coach at Arizona State. He's a Georgia grad, which makes you think like, okay, well, is this actually going to be, because Georgia cycled through some receivers coaches, is he going to wind up back at Georgia and be the Brian Hartline of Georgia? But Kenny Dillingham, with what he does as an offensive play caller, that system, Hines Ward made a bunch of money in the NFL, doesn't have to chase. Like, if they could keep him around, right, guy with a rare resume, I wonder if Hines Ward could maybe kind of be a guy like that, because kind of on the lookout for people like that. But anyway, Jamarcus Shepard is a guy we talked about. He's been on your list for some bigger jobs. He was at Purdue for a long time as an Indiana native, but now he went to Washington, and then he followed Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. So it's like he had a good thing. He was doing a really good job with Brom at Purdue for a while, right? And it's like we talked about elevating.
Good job with Washington with their receivers. Yeah.
So it's like, oh, Rondale Moore, David Bell, Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, that guy who was so good, he's in Alabama now. Right? So like that, like how can you imagine if Purdue would have somehow been able to keep him around if Brom had stayed, and like Brom and Jamarcus Shepard were just like, this is it. And Purdue was like, fine, we'll give Brom $7 million a year and we'll give Jamarcus Shepard 1.8 a year to coach receivers. Let's do this. What Purdue could be right now, but that feels impossible. But what if you could have done that? Right? You had it in a window, and we know what it looks like. What does it look like? Oh, you mean when Purdue made the Big Ten title game? You mean like when Rondale Moore, as a true freshman, set college football on fire and beat Ohio State? That. And then what happened? That got stolen.
Yeah. They could have also made Jamarcus Shepard the head coach when Jeff Brom left instead of Ryan Walters. But, what are you going to do?
You'll be an AD someday. I have that in my heart. You'll be an AD someday.
I was team. I was all about Ryan Walters when they made the hire. I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't, but
yeah,
could have gone.
Sometimes you got to know who's in your building, right? I'm very much pro know the guy. I don't want to hire the guy down the hall, but I want to have awareness of who's in my building and be on alert when I think you have a rare dude. Yeah. So that can be a different thing. In your building when it's rare, not in your building because it's easy. Very quickly, the best receivers are in the South. You figured that out. So hey, everybody, we taught you something.
You'll
new.
Be shocked to learn. Top 200 receivers in every recruiting class from 2022 to 2025. So the last 4 signed classes. 25 out of Texas, 21 out of Florida, which does include, I think, 2 IMG Academy guys who are actually from Chicago. Okay. So, shout out to Illinois. But 21 from Florida, 9 from California, 6 each for Georgia, Louisiana, and Alabama, and then 5 each for North Carolina and Illinois. Like, Illinois is like the only one in the North that kind of had a decent number there comparatively. Yeah. So
we know this, and it is a great strategy. And I certainly make note of it. I mean, like, whatever, stars, what is it? But, and we're not, of course, stars do matter. But certainly when you see Wisconsin, Minnesota, Washington, Syracuse, Boston College, Pitt, Maryland, anybody like that dip in, it's like, hey, they signed a 3-star receiver out of somewhere in the South. My antenna go up.
Yeah.
Like your ability to be aggressive there and try to find maybe the guy down there who just got lost because he was the 17th best receiver in his county. But up here in the North, he would have been the 3rd best receiver in his state, right? That's the kind of thing where and this is, again, I think we're getting to a point here, specifically what Ohio State is doing is hard to replicate, but I think we're going to get to the point where I would invest in this. If I were a head coach in the North, like I would invest in, I need an aggressive, certainly developmental receivers coach, but who's going to go find these guys because it is a program changer.
Yeah. And it's not just that those states tend to have more talent. We're also, there's a correlation between those states and the proliferation of 7-on-7 and spring football, when you're talking about Texas,
Yeah.
Florida, California, Georgia, Louisiana, Alabama, which I think everyone knows that, right? But
Yeah.
it's an advantage. It's an advantage that the South has over the North because the North has been slower to embrace 7-on-7 and practically doesn't embrace spring football at the high school level. So you have to navigate yourself around that. And I think like I would hesitate to do this with every position, but I think you can do it with some skill positions, receiver in particular, that if you pull a 3-star receiver from Georgia and that kid grew up in East St. Louis, Missouri, or whatever, or East St. Louis, Illinois,
yeah,
he's probably a 4-star prospect because of the way he would stand out among his peers.
Yeah. So that matters. And then the other thing we want to discuss is you have to throw it to get these guys, and you crunch those numbers, because that to me, and I have a quote from Marvin Harrison Jr. from a couple years ago when I asked him about this. My instinct, wouldn't it be? Yeah, you better be chucking it around in order to get these receivers to come play for you.
Yeah, it turns out maybe that's not the case. I think it depends on how you want to approach it. Like, I think there's a style of offense, a style of passing game. You know, do you use a lot of the route tree? Do you have NFL like concepts within your offense? I think all those things matter, but from a pure volume standpoint, I don't know that there's much of a correlation between passing volume and receiver or even quarterback recruiting. There's like the programs that have signed the most receivers, like top 10 receivers over the last 6 years, are Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, Oregon, USC, and Texas A&M. And the only one of those programs that throws the ball significantly more than it runs it is USC. Everyone else runs it more. It's probably more appropriate to say they're just balanced. They're like about 50-50. Maybe it's 52-48 some years, but they're far more balanced offenses. Whereas USC over the last couple of years has thrown it like almost 60% of the time. But they're the outlier among the programs that do the best job of recruiting the top end of receivers.
Yeah. What was the phrase? Well, we were talking about this. It was like air raid attitude without air raid execution or something, right? Like it's
like Ohio State. Yeah. Like Ohio State definitely has air raid principles within its offense. But doesn't live the life, right? not solely dependent on that to dictate whether they are successful or not. So that's the balance, I think. It's like Ryan Day, I would say, added a level of sophistication to Ohio State's passing attack that was severely lacking, which then attracted better quarterbacks, attracted better receivers, and it kind of took off. But they still run the ball. Like we saw J.K. Dobbins run for 2,000 yards in 2019. We saw what Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson did during Ohio State's national championship run. But the offense is far more complementary to one another, like run pass, than I think it has been, especially in a place like Ohio State.
So this is a Marvin Harrison Jr. quote from before the 2023 season, the Big Ten Media Days. And I was trying to get to like what matters more, like the Hartline in the room or the Ryan Day offense. And Marvin Harrison Jr. said, if you're a receiver, you want to go to a system that's going to throw the ball a lot. That's just natural. So I think Ohio State is one of the schools that does that. One of the best throughout the country. Coach Day, his system, the concepts that he runs, it's very pro-like. For a lot of us, we're trying to get to that pro level. There's no better place to do that than Ohio State, especially as a receiver. We have Coach Hartline, and you're in a room where you're common among the uncommon. I think that's a perfect place for you as a receiver. So the thing that I noted from this is when he answered that question, he started with the Ryan Day offense. Of course, he said a million great things about Brian Hartline over the years. But reading this, I could have followed that up with, well, you know, Marvin, like Ohio State doesn't even run it more than half the time, right? Yeah. So it feels, I think the offense that you want to run, if you want to attract great receiver talent, is you want it to feel like you're throwing it a lot without actually throwing it a lot. And then also, like, this is an interesting contrast between Ohio State and Tennessee. Like, is it not that Tennessee spread the hashes out, chuck it down the field kind of passing offense is not as sophisticated as Ohio State's, might be easier to learn. Certainly those Tennessee receivers have put up some good numbers lately, and they've gotten some accolades, but I don't think you would compare the recent run, like, you know, what they've done in the NFL, the kind of receivers that they've become. You wouldn't compare that to Ohio State. So would the advice of, hey, we want to recruit great receivers, what's the advice? from an offensive standpoint. It is have offensive continuity where you're actually more balanced than you realize, but your passing concepts are pretty sophisticated in a way that the receivers can feel like they're being developed for the next level rather than just like, we want you to be able to grasp this offense quickly.
Yeah, I think so. There was a bit of a talking point in 2022 when Jalen Hyatt won the Biletnikoff and Marvin Harrison Jr. was a finalist. That if you like watch them on tape, Marvin Harrison Jr. was being asked to do far more as a receiver than Jalen Hyatt was. That there's something about the Ohio State offense too that lends itself to increased receiver production. I don't think anybody is pretending that it doesn't. But they're asked to do a lot more with the ball and without the ball that I think prepares them probably far more for the NFL than like Tennessee's offense would, than most offenses would. So that's the selling point. It's a pro offense. It's a pro offense more often than not with a pro quarterback, which I think is the other part of this that we haven't delved into. It's like there's definitely some correlation between quarterback recruiting and receiver recruiting. If you look at like who's done the best job of recruiting the quarterback position, a lot of those programs are also high up on the list of teams that have gotten the best receivers. I don't think that would be surprising to anybody either. But it's one thing to like, I guess at some point strike it right where you get those players, but then put the concepts on the field in a way that is replicable. And I think Ohio State actually, Dwayne Haskins in 2018, which was the year that Ohio State really like leaned in to throwing it a lot and probably most resembled an air raid team under Ryan Day. That was sort of the year to kind of put it all on display for everybody. Like, here's what we have. Here's what we can do. Here's what it can look like. It's not always going to look like this in terms of run pass balance, but these are the things we can do for you, young quarterbacks, young receivers, in Ohio State's offense that will probably be slightly more balanced than it was with Dwayne Haskins. But that was like sort of the smorgasbord of passing game there that I think changed a lot of people's perceptions of what Ohio State can be for quarterbacks and receivers.
Yeah. So then does doing all of this, it's like, what's the point of all this? Is just to have like put good receivers in the NFL and have good receiver stats and let your fans think it's fun? It's like, no, you're trying to win. Do good receivers, do great receivers, does focusing on this, making this a part of your team that it's like, you want to be great at everything, but man, we are going to get guys who can catch the ball. Does that help you win? What is your short answer to that? Do great receivers help you win?
Yes. The short answer is yes. And that I think it's much more of a necessity now than it used to be.
I agree with that. And I think we can talk about, again, Iowa State, the best season in program history with guys who went back-to-back 1,000 yards as receivers. I don't know that Iowa State's ever going to see that again. There's a particular guy, Nathan Shieldhouse, great hire, develop him as a coach. He sets this agenda of what receivers can do. He gets these guys in, and then boom, this happens even after he left, right? Syracuse, we talked about. Indiana, we talked about last year. I mean, obviously, their receiver play was not Indiana's receiver play a decent driving force. The Mike Shanahan offense and the receivers coach, a decent driving force of what they did to be a playoff team?
I think so. Yeah. It turned out not to be the case. We were talking about going to the Ohio State Indiana game. Like, oh, I wonder if these Indiana receivers can give Ohio State some problems. It turned out no, because they couldn't block Ohio State. But yes, I think the receiver play was more of a driving factor for that offense than like quarterback or O-line was.
We're going to have a conversation with PJ Fleck coming up here. 2019, when Minnesota would have made a 12-team playoff, what's the driving force of that team? Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson at receiver. Similar to those two Iowa State guys, right? They want to go on to be a first-round pick and a fifth-round pick. They were a quarterback in Tanner Morgan, who I think is not a bad comparison for Rocco Beck. Was it an NFL quarterback? No. It was NFL receivers who elevated the entire program, and that's not coincidental. That was like one of the great seasons in Minnesota history. Right. So I think it is an elevator. It is something worth focusing on for teams that are trying to jump, whatever that tier of team is, like not a blue blood, but that tier 2, tier 3, you're trying to jump. I'd get after receivers, man. Any doubt there? And I'm not sure that I would have fought that as much before we had this discussion.
No, I'm with you. I would do it too. I just think like it's especially beneficial, I think, in the college game with the hash marks and the spacing being different. It's like if you can have guys that are, really difficult to cover, then you just open up a lot for your offense. I think people understand that. So I don't know that I think it's the most important thing still. but I think it has gained in importance over the last couple of years. Because if you even look at some of the national title teams, the non-Ohio State national title teams that maybe you don't associate with great receiver play, like even those teams, like more often than not, had a little something to them when it came to throwing the ball at that position.
I think the turning point is 2016. I would say the last 9 years, 14 Ohio State. Big deal about Cardale Jones coming in. Michael Thomas is a great receiver. They don't throw the ball that much to him, but that's Ezekiel Elliott driving that, right? And then 2015 Alabama is Derrick Henry going crazy. Calvin Ridley's a 1,000-yard receiver, but nobody's going to pretend that like Bama won the title in 15 because of receiver play. Since then, 2016 national champ Clemson, Mike Williams, 1,361 yards, future first-round pick. 2017, Calvin Ridley is a future first-round guy at receiver for Bama, the national champs, borderline 1,000-yard guy, and a bunch of young guys on that roster, including Devontae Smith making the catch in the national championship game against Georgia to get him over the top. 2018, Justin Ross for Clemson, national champ, 1,000 yards as a true freshman for his injuries. T. Higgins is a future NFL guy. Hunter Renfrow is a future NFL guy. The receivers really matter. 2019 LSU speaks for itself. Jamar Chase, 1,780 yards. Justin Jefferson, 1,540 yards. Two future NFL superstars. 2020, Devontae Smith wins the Heisman. Jalen Waddle, who's a first-round pick, gets hurt, and they have another first-round pick behind him that they can lean on. Plus, John Mechie's in there pretty good. Incredibly important. 2021, Georgia's probably an exception here because they are a defense-first team, but that defense-first team lost in the SEC championship game to a Jamison Williams, John Mechie receiver program at Alabama. And then a big chunk of why Alabama could not beat Georgia again in the national title game is because John Mechie was already hurt and Jamison Williams tore his ACL in the second quarter when the score was 3-3. So Georgia doesn't have those guys. They do have Brock Bowers. We'll get to him in a second. But they beat Bama in large part because Bama's receivers, who were better than the Georgia receivers, got hurt. Mm-hmm. And if Mechie and Williams were healthy, I think Bama wins that national title on receiver play.
I agree.
2022, Georgia repeats. They repeat on Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. And we may as well talk about Brock Bowers as a receiver here. He's a pass catcher. He's a game changer. Yeah. And Ladd McConkey, who goes on to be the 37th pick in the draft, they win because Stetson Bennett marches him down the field. They're dropping 50 on people. Receiver play, huge part of Georgia's second title. Michigan 23, exception that proves the rule. Harbaugh goes the opposite way, but you better have an awesome offensive line, run the ball, be tough as heck, have a great defense. These are all the other things if you're not going to have the receiver play. And then Ohio State last year, Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka. The thing that I think happened, Bill, is particularly in the North, Michigan's dominance of 4 straight against Ohio State with running the ball defense, and Ohio State throws the ball better than Michigan, but what does it matter? I feel like that turned part of the conversation in the North, and especially for Ohio State and Michigan fans, toward you throw for show and you run the ball and play defense to win. And I don't think that's true. I think Michigan in the end is the exception that proves the rule. But if you're almost anybody else, get some offensive continuity and a guy in the receiver room who can recruit and develop, and you have a really good chance to win. Yeah.
Like styles make fights nowhere more than the Ohio State Michigan game.
Yes.
Maybe. So like, I wouldn't push back at all anybody who thinks like it applies there. But I think generally, if you're striving to win national championships, a major separator is what you can figure out at the receiver position.
And then if you think you have a great receiver coach, as much as I think they are replaceable, if you think you've got something going that you want to keep around, I don't know what Iowa State could have done to keep Nathan Shieldhouse, right? Mm-hmm. But it's worthwhile, right? It's worthwhile, I think, trying to do that. John points out, yes, Michigan had Colston Loveland. Yes, they had Ronnie Bell a couple years ago. They have Roman Wilson, who's going to be a second rounder. But it's not certainly not the identity of Michigan, right? And even like the way Michigan uses Colston, I mean, the receiver play last year was just because of the quarterback play, it was very difficult for Michigan. But
yeah, I think there's some truth in there too about terrible. Like, yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, you can't. I don't think you can be dysfunctional there and win sort of in spite of it. Like when Michigan was not a team that was driven by its receiver play, but when it had to go to those guys, like they had guys who were capable of like answering that call. Which is like the Ohio State 2016 offense, right? Like had nothing at receiver. They had Curtis Samuel and JT Barrett, and that was kind of it. So when they got down against Clemson in the playoff and had to throw the ball to get back in the game, they were incapable of doing it. That's what I was referencing earlier when I said, like, before that game, I wrote a column for Cleveland.com that said, like, Ohio State can't throw, and it doesn't matter because, like, the last X number of national champions, like, weren't throwing either. And it just so happened to be the inflection point of college football, where throwing the ball suddenly became very important. I wish I would have known that beforehand.
Yeah, because Saban screwed it up for people for a long time. Because it's like, oh, just do what that guy does. It's like, oh, you mean like, just have all the best defensive players all the time.
11 first-round picks on the field on defense. Yeah,
I'd rather go try to find a couple receivers who are kind of maybe getting lost in the shuffle in Georgia or Florida or Louisiana or a place like that, and then like get some offensive linemen in the portal who can block it up enough to give those receivers a chance. But I just would not advise. I don't want to say it's a quick fix, but it can make up, I think, for other areas where you are lacking if you dedicate yourself to focusing on receiver play.
Yeah.
All right. When we come back after our first break, we will be joined by the head coach of the Minnesota Golden Gophers, PJ Fleck. And at the end of the show, we'll talk about Nico. Would you take him? Quick break here on KOTN. Joined now by PJ Fleck, head coach of the Minnesota Golden Gophers. PJ, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having us on the show, guys. Appreciate it.
So, PJ, I don't know if you followed along with this. Maybe not. Did you hear about our bracket of the 64 most important people in Northern college football? Did that cross your purview at all?
Yeah, I don't want to insult you, but no. I mean, there's only so much room in this brain for information, and I think our people understand that here, and I didn't get that one.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll let you know. In that, it was, like the people who are going to impact Northern college football in 2025. We had a defensive player region, okay? The defensive player who won, it's just me and Bill voting, and then made it to the Final Four was Koi Perich. That's how good we think he is. That's how important we think he is to Northern college football and Minnesota football. That's what he's been and the potential that he has. What do you think about Koi Perich as our most important defensive player?
Well, I think him being in the Final Four is a really good selection. I think he's a really special college football player. We consider him our unicorn. They don't come around like that very often. And when they do, you got to make sure that as a head coach, one, you're not giving him too much, but you're giving him everything he can possibly handle. And you can put him in every position to change a game, offensively, defensively, and special teams. And him being a kick returner, punt returner for us, him playing a little bit of offense last year, but now I'm going to play more in a significant role of not just a gadget guy, but be involved in the offense more. And then obviously being one of our best safeties. But, he can't do that without his entire team. And I know that sounds cliche, but, you've got to have a really good supporting cast for somebody to do that. You've got to have really good coaches, and you got to have support of the players around you that know you're not just doing that for a recruiting tactic. You're doing it because he's one of the best players in college football. So I think you're spot on. Just like the NCAA committee, in my opinion, out of 68 teams got it right with the Final Four. I think you guys hit it spot on.
We appreciate that. Sometimes people don't love our selection committee, so let me
having a Minnesota Gopher in the top four guys. You guys should have had two.
I know we got we talk Gophers all the time, PJ. We got to tell you. So I'll tell you, last spring, Ryan Day at Ohio State sprinkled briefly the idea of could Caleb Downs play a little offense, and we went nuts. Colorado, it's like, hey, what's Travis Hunter? So Caleb Downs didn't play offense for squat. And we were like, oh man, Travis Hunter revolutionized college football. On the Caleb Downs, Travis Hunter scale, where can Koi Perich really fit in here? Like, are you guys really going to do this? Because this is a great spring football topic, but you're getting us fired up, PJ.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're definitely doing it. I don't think we're going to ever waste time on doing something to show something that we wouldn't invest a ton of time in. I think last year, he played sparingly on offense because that was an experiment of just seeing, can he do it? What could we do with him? He had just got there in June. I don't think what people don't realize is that this is a true freshman that got here in June, right? By December, he was first team All Big Ten, second team All American. He was an All Big Ten punt returner and kick returner. And he hasn't even been through a full spring ball yet. So we didn't even get a lot of time to say, what could he do? How much can he handle? Is he going to be able to handle all of this? And you're not, the time to adapt to that's not week 6, of a season saying, okay, we're just going to throw him on offense, because you've got wideouts and running backs and tight ends working all year, perfecting their craft to earn the right to get a ball, let alone somebody who hasn't done that yet, just walk in the facility and not do all the integral parts that of being a great receiver, a greater running back, make you special. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun since January of what Coach Harbaugh and our offensive staff have created for Koi, and the credit goes to Koi too, because we're putting a lot on his plate.
PJ, what were the conversations like with your equipment staff getting that split jersey we saw Koi wearing the other day? Like I saw the quarterback said they were mad because they couldn't quite see him because he's wearing the same color as the defense. Now you got him split maroon and white. Was it easy to get a hold of that jersey where your EQ staff had their head spinning there to get?
Well, saying he can't see him is just an excuse. It's like,
yeah,
right. I didn't see him, coach. He's wearing that jersey. I said he was wearing the same jersey, I mean, a week ago when you threw the interception before we changed it. So, that was something that, sometimes I'll just throw something out there in a staff meeting. And our staff does such a good job of taking what I say, putting it through a funnel, knowing what's actually real and what I'm not going to actually need and want. Because you're just you're almost spitballing ideas, and literally just said, I think we should split his jersey in half. I think it'd be really good for, him, because we got pennies and you got orange pennies and yellow pennies, and you're throwing something over his head in between a play. And I'm like, just split the jersey. But it's not about splitting the jersey. Our equipment manager, Brady Ganyu, I mean, he has all types of things he's good at, including being a seamstress. This guy, the seams are flawless on this jersey. This looks authentic. It looks real. It looks like it was created from Nike just for Koi. So Brady deserves a ton of credit for the craftsmanship of the way the jersey looks.
Details matter.
That's right.
But now Koi wants, he's wearing different. He's wearing one shoe white, one shoe black. He wants half of his helmet maroon, half of it white. He's got one maroon glove, one white glove. It's like, okay, now of course, Koi has taken it and ran and put it at a different level, which, if you know Koi, is so Koi.
Yeah, you're going to have kids throughout the state of Minnesota splitting their clothes in half all season. I love it.
He's a trendsetter.
Yeah.
He is. So we're talking about Koi Perich, PJ, obviously one of the best players in college football, and nature of the sport being what it is, you got to make sure you're doing what you do to keep those guys on your roster, right? And I thought you guys did a really nice job of keeping really almost all of your kind of star power that wasn't going off to the NFL draft on your roster coming back this year. With your NIL set up the way that it is, how much do you guys prioritize retention and making sure that you're taking care of your guys and keeping your roster where it needs to be? Obviously, you have to add from the outside too, but what are the steps in that process as you try to identify retention and then addition?
Well, we still have another portal season to get through and navigate through, obviously. But we've had a lot of retention success when you look at it, especially from our starters, for the most part, all staying intact and staying here. You'll lose some depth guys because I think guys really want opportunities to go play, and our program's full of transparency, and you got to have those conversations with them. But this goes all the way back to recruiting. When the transfer portal hit, NIL hit, look, I'm at Minnesota. We're not going to have the highest NIL budget. Like we're not going to ever be the highest bidder for a player ever. The TV money, that helps, right? Because I think that's where a small piece of the parity is, whether it's Ohio State, Oregon, Minnesota. In the TV money, we have parity. But the NIL, we do not have parity. It is still Major League Baseball, right? Some people could have $30 million in NIL. Some people could have $3 million in NIL. And I know people are trying to get their hands around that, but that isn't parity at all. So when you're at a program like Minnesota, you've got to recruit, retain players who might value so many things before they get to money. All money does is enhance the things above the money and what you actually value. It just enhances it. Doesn't make your life any better. It doesn't make your life promised. It doesn't bring you fulfillment. It brings you small satisfaction pretty quickly. And then boom, life hits you in the face. But what do you value? And if money's the number one thing you value, we'll never be able to hold on to that kid. So we create still this life program, academically, athletically, socially, spiritually, a program of serving and giving that players come here to go be the best men they can be. Husbands, fathers, football players, people. That is what we still do. Maybe we're a dinosaur walking the planet right now where a lot of teams went to transactional relationships. We are truly a transformational relationship, which is even harder to do now because it's easier just to make it transactional. So I think for us, we have to find the players who don't just value money, but we understand money is a piece of it. But if you can create this worldwide experience that makes their life better, you have a better chance to hold on to that player when money's getting thrown at them left and right. And I'm not an idiot. I'm not saying our players haven't been thrown money from other people already. I mean, we all understand what's going on in college football right now. But we've had a really good retention rate, and it isn't because we're the highest bidder. And I think that's a compliment to our coaches, our staff, our administration, the environment we create for our student athletes, not just football, but all the other student athletes that people really want to stay here and keep growing. And that's a compliment. And these days it's hard to have them. So I'm just proud of our players.
Does that emphasize even more? I mean, you need to be a development program. Everybody needs to be a development program. But sometimes now there's the possibility that a guy that you recruit and develop, someone might come pluck him away. So you've got to be ready to recruit and develop somebody else. And like in a weird backwards way, it can almost be a compliment of like, hey, like we helped this guy become what he is. And now look, everybody wants him. How do you feel about where you guys are with that part of it, of being able to maybe take guys who you found in recruiting and then build them up into something?
Yeah, I mean, we're always going to be a developmental program. And I think you even said that everybody has to develop at their own pace. I think what this has created for us is we've always been a developmental program. Even go back to Western Michigan and what we've done at Minnesota. And I'm not saying we've always done it with just redshirting players and going through it, but the old college football, you had 4 or 5 years to develop a kid into what he wanted to be. I mean, Tanner Morgan, our quarterback here, who's the all-time winningest quarterback a few years ago, he played almost 7 years here. So there was a lot of time to develop that kid. I think with players with outside influences more than ever, whether it's agents, right, that have a say in what they're doing, telling them to get to the NFL faster because it's a young man's game, maximize how much money you want to make in the National Football League, maximize how much money and the experience you have in college football, but do it in a shorter amount of time. So I think that we've had to adapt a little bit to, okay, we're still a developmental program. Close to 80% of our players are still high school players that come here as high school players and develop through their senior year and degree and things like that. But I think you got to do it in a shorter amount of time, whether that's a 1-year transfer you get, a 2-year transfer you get. High school players, you are a little bit more of like, okay, this is this year's team. How can we squeeze all the juice from the orange for this team and develop everybody at their own rate on the field, off the field, but let's expedite it a little bit better and really kind of cut off the fat of maybe what we could get away with in the past. We can't get away with now in a good way of just saying they have so many other people in their ear telling them whether it's true or not. They have way more people in their ear telling them what they should do. So we just have to do it and maximize it in the shortest amount of time possible for that particular year. Because you can see whether it's the NBA or college basketball or college football or the NFL, I mean, you need to win, and you need to win now. The days of taking 3 to 4 years to turn around a program, people aren't as patient anymore. And if you're at a program with sustainability and you're winning, one tough year gets everybody doubting a lot faster than it may be in the past.
You brought up quarterbacks, PJ, so I'm going to go to quarterbacks. What you guys did last year, bringing in Max Brosmer, and I'm still, I think we're all still trying to figure out transfer quarterbacks and what's the best way to work all that. But I thought to bring in Brosmer and have a young quarterback like Drake Lindsay, and to have the older veteran who is ready to play, who is helping mentor a younger guy. And now we see, it seems like they had a great relationship. And here Drake Lindsay is. What did you think of that setup in the quarterback room? Because I think, it can be one thing to be like, oh, it's going to grab a transfer. I don't know. it felt like there was I felt like a plan to that. How did you think that worked out with Brosmer and Lindsey in there?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer to have a player that's there 3 to 4 years at the quarterback position.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I prefer that. That doesn't mean that it's always going to be 100%. There are people who prefer opposite of that. I prefer that type of leader, organizing, leading, managing, developing the whole team from the player perspective. And we've always had that, whether that was Zach Terrell at Western Michigan, whether that was Tanner Morgan here. And with this bridge that we had in between Max Brosmer and the next quarterback, like that was critical for us because we didn't want to go all in on just a true freshman quarterback. So we needed an experienced veteran who could give us a ton that we could, let's call a spade, that you can go afford, right? That you can have without spending $4 million of your whole NIL on one player, because you have to surround them with really good players too. So we had to really think strategically. Max Brosmer was a perfect fit for us. It was a perfect opportunity. What he was looking for, he wasn't looking for. And this takes a lot of maturity. He wasn't looking for going into a room with 4 guys competing. Everybody's getting told the same thing. And hey, it might work out. It might not. He'd stay at New Hampshire if that was the case. He was looking for who was in our type of situation where he could get in there. He could play at this level. He could keep developing, and he could mentor the next young quarterbacks. And I think it was a perfect marriage and a perfect fit. And now we have the opportunity with Max Brosmer handing that torch off to the next player who's really going to develop and hopefully lead our team for the next 3 to 4 years.
PJ, I want to ask you about your running back room, your backfield, because we had Darius Taylor on the show last year at Big Ten Media Days. He was great. And I still think he's one of the more underrated players in the country still somehow, in my opinion. But you add to that room with some pretty dynamic running backs. And the thing I want to ask you about that is I guess twofold. One, what does adding the kind of depth you added do for Darius in terms of workload in the backfield? And two, you guys did use Darius, I thought, more as a slot receiver last year, maybe than you had previously in his career. Does adding what you've added in the portal at running back allow you to use Darius in different ways as you go and look at your offense, what it could look like in 2025?
You know, it does. If you go back to Darius in high school, Darius was really a high school receiver until his last year. And he's got such natural catching skills, natural wide receiver skills, movement skills, spatial awareness of the wide receiver position. He's just trapped in this running back body, and he happens to be a really good running back as well. And I think his freshman year, we found out a ton of what he can and cannot do. And then last year, that Coach Harbaugh adapted our offense really, really well to fit Max and Darius. I mean, Darius has just as many catches as he does, when you're looking at his carries on Saturdays. But what it allows now is some versatility to get some other backs on the field at the same time, where you're in some unique personnel groupings that might necessarily not fit the normal 21 personnel or the 12 personnel. You can get some unique formations and personnel groupings out there with multiple athletes, from wide receiver to Koi to Darius, but also a running back on the field with some really good tight ends. We have never had this versatility from top to bottom on offense of people who can do so much. And I think that's what this spring has been about, is what can we do? How can we continue to evolve our offense into what fits the skill personnel that we have on offense and make us the most explosive offense we can be? But Darius Taylor is a center point of that and always will be. And this year was a big focus, was let's become even a better running back than we were in the past, because I think he's always been adapting to that a little bit. I think even more of a wideout, he's a little bit more natural than he was as a wideout as a young player here. But now he's becoming a really special running back, along with having the gifts that he does in the pass game.
So we're talking about all these things, right? We're talking about, you have dynamic guy on defense, dynamic guy on offense. You got a lot back. You retain players, you develop players. And Doug's been on this, so I don't want to steal his thunder a little bit.
Steal.
Like Minnesota feels like it's ready to elevate in a 12-team playoff world. And I'm wondering, looking at last year, looking at some of the teams that got in, especially a team in your conference like Indiana, like what did that show you guys about what is attainable for your program now that we have, thankfully, more access to the postseason in college football?
Yeah, that expansion is very real, and expansion is very necessary, and expansion benefits people like the Minnesota Golden Gophers, especially in the college football playoff world. And, I talked about this, whether this was the BCS or whether it's college football playoff. We talk about that here. When you look back in past seasons, 2019, we would have been in the playoff.
Yep.
right? So when we fathom like we can do it, it isn't as far of a reach as it used to be. And I think it's more realistic, and it helps the cultural sustainability of people staying a long period of time when you know you're at a place that can do it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen every year, but the possibility of it happening is very real. And I think that's where, even in recruiting, people see that. I mean, what we're doing in recruiting is historic from the Minnesota development high school players level and the surrounding states. And more people, because of the cultural sustainability, I mean, this is year 9 for us. Look at years 9 through 14 as, hey, these could be the best years since the 60s for Minnesota Golden Gopher football. Could be. Doesn't mean it will be, but it could be. And I think that carrot is obtainable and it's reachable. And it's always now in front of us, where I think in the past, when there was only 4, I think there were plenty of data points that would tell you that it was almost impossible for us to be able to do that, for any team of our nature to do that. But now it's incredibly realistic for somebody within our conference. Every year is going to do it. So hopefully we have some home playoff games here in January in the state of Minnesota.
I'm looking for my calendar. I'm booking my travel, PJ. My God, we will be there. We will be there the moment that happens. Thank you for not saying, well, we don't talk about that. We don't want to think about it, because we're talking about it. Like, we'll send you the clip, Minnesota playoff dark horse. That was our last. So like, we're there. We see the possibilities. And I think it's so good for the sport, PJ. Like, it's
I think
so
you bring
good.
up, not to interrupt you, but I think you're bringing up a good point. I mean, first of all, like, we're proud of what we've done.
Yeah.
But we're also really excited about where we could go. And I do love talking about it. And this is a team you can be really transparent with. There are some teams, to your point, you can only say so much. But when you have a team that you really believe in, it's okay to talk about it to them, because I want them to have that realistic expectation and goal. If you're never really even talking to them about it, they're like, why does our coach never talk about winning championships? Why do they not talk about the college football playoff? Are they afraid? Do they not think we can actually get there? That is the last thing I want in my players' mind. That's the last thing I want in my staff's mind. Now, if I know we're like not very good, I never really talk about these things in the first year that I take over a program, or haven't, because it's going to have to need a lot more watering and fertilization for that thing to happen. But any year now, as we continue to, with the portal, every team kind of reloads, you do have an opportunity. You just have to win those one possession games. In 19, we were 6-1 in one possession games of the 7 we played. This year, we were 3-4. If we were 6-1 again, we would have been in talk for that college football playoff. So every team is that close, especially a team like Minnesota, when you're going to be in a lot of one possession games by the style that we play, that it's going to happen. It can happen, and it's okay to talk about it with your team.
So listen, I know Koi's got a lot going on with the wearing 2 shoes and all that kind of stuff, but if you want to tell him that he made the Final Four of the most important people in Northern college football, you could feel free if you'd like to drop that to him.
I'll definitely tell him. I can't tell you what his response will be, but I'll definitely tell him.
What an honor.
Look at me like, what are you talking about?
I mean, I know you made all Big Ten, but Final Four of this random YouTube show, that doesn't get bigger than that. PJ, Minnesota is a fascinating program to talk about. We do it a lot. We appreciate you joining us on this show. And listen, man, like, again, you're not afraid of it. We're going to call you again during the season. Like, if you guys are 4-0, like, you'll be hearing from us, man. So, like, we appreciate it, and good luck to you guys.
You can call us anytime. Really appreciate having on the show. Thanks for talking great things about Minnesota football, and we'll see you in the fall, guys. Thanks a lot. Row the boat, Sky Ma, go Gophers.
Thank you, PJ.
Thank you.
All right, so he didn't shut us down. The Minnesota playoff talk is allowed, according to the head coach.
Thank God, because we were going to do it anyway. But happy to have
How
the
dare
permission
you?
of the head coach.
Yeah. So that was great. So, well, we like having the head coaches on. So we reached out to a bunch of people, and we appreciate Minnesota getting back to us. We do want to say this is a part of the show that we want to lean into far more than we have done before, which is making sure that we have opportunities for everybody who watches or listens to be part of it. So we've always enjoyed our great live YouTube watchers who get in the chat, and we reference them at times during the show, but we want to make sure that everybody can ask us questions and give us comments at askkotn@gmail.com. ASKKOTN at gmail.com, right? You set it up. Did I say it right? I said it right?
You did. You said it right. Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yep, it's there. It's live.
So we will, in the future, I don't know if we'll do full mailbag shows, but we certainly will work in questions from people. If you have comments about the show, we are certainly open to that. If you have specific questions that you would like us to discuss on the show, we are certainly open to that. And at times we will ask you certain things. And I'm going to do that after the break. And then the next show, I hope we get some responses from people and we can work those comments into the show as well. So I want to ask you about Nico. We'll do that next on KOTN. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis back. Everybody's talking about Nico Iamaleava, and we understand that. And he is no longer going to be the Tennessee quarterback for this season after being the quarterback as a sophomore last year that was at center as they made the college football playoff. I'm not sure that he was the driving force, but he was good enough, right? He was good enough, Landis, for Tennessee to make the playoff. That's not nothing.
No, he's got some real upside, definitely.
Yeah. So the question I want to ask people for the KOTN mailbag, for askkotn@gmail.com, is, would you take Nico for your school? And if you want to respond to this, tell us who your team is. Would you take him for your team? And to Landis, that's a twofold discussion. That's the discussion we're going to have right now to wrap up the show. Do you need him? Talent? Just a straight up, would he be better than the quarterbacks you have? But that's not the only discussion, Bill, right? Is there a culture discussion? Is there what it means to your team? Or is that a silly thing in the NIL portal world to worry about? If he can help you win games, would everybody welcome him with open arms?
Yeah, it's a difficult conversation to have, I think. Like, yes, it's a thing. It's maybe been made a little too much of. Because like Nico Iamaleava is not the first player to engage in conversations about getting a raise from his current team. His spilled out publicly in a way that hasn't really happened before.
Mm-hmm.
And like however you want to couch him missing practice holdout. I don't think him missing practice was a holdout. I think him missing practice was, I'm leaving. So like I don't know that that's what that was either. So if you can get your way around that, then yeah, I think you can make yourself comfortable with bringing him into your locker room because he is a talented quarterback. I don't think that he is all that different from a lot of other players in college football who were just trying to maximize their earning potential. I would just say that his people went about it in the wrong way. Doesn't necessarily mean that he's like a bad guy to have in your building.
So we will list some schools here, some northern schools that just we think, hey, take a shot. But I wrote down 5 things that are sort of at play here. And then I was like, actually, it could be 12. And then I thought, well, that's not really what we're doing here. We don't need to list every in and out. But one of the things, this is just a reminder of how complicated this is. And we understand that Congress continues to talk about this. We understand that there may be some kind of solution there. Certainly, I throw out collective bargaining. And if you make agreements with players between the NCAA and the schools and the players, then you can create a structure, make some rules. But if you were going to do that, the first thing you'd have to do is create some sort of group, a union or something who represents the players. And that's easier said than done. So there are a lot of complicating factors here, Bill. But it was a reminder to me of it's not pro sports.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. And there's a couple things here that I thought came out. One is that if a bunch of players do something, and if it had ever happened, and I certainly had been curious over time of whether any large group of players would ever strike. If you just could get, if you had 8 years ago gotten to the point where you could somehow get 200 of the basketball players who were playing in the NCAA tournament to, as March Madness is starting, say, we're not playing. We're not playing because we're not getting paid, and you guys are making all the money and we're not. And you disrupt an event. That would have been incredibly impactful and influential. But there's a huge difference between a group of people doing something and one guy doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't have a one-man strike. So like a one-man strike's a holdout, right? And that is, I think in college sports, I think there would have been a reaction to a group of players maybe doing something like that. But the negative reaction, I think, for many fans to a single player doing it, it can be lonely out there. And it feels like this is primarily a negative reaction against a single player. Do you feel that?
Yes. Everything that I've seen has been mostly negative toward Nico and giving Tennessee kudos for standing its ground and not acquiescing to whatever demands Nico's camp might have been making. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing is the fleeting nature of this, right? That these guys, for good and for bad, only have a couple years here for the school, for good and for bad. If your NFL quarterback did this and said, like, I'm out, could potentially destroy your franchise. He was only going to play at Tennessee one more year anyway. So it's a reminder of your leverage. No matter how great a single player is, as much as I think teams can feel like, oh my gosh, we have to get this guy. The fleeting nature of college sports, I do think, decreases your leverage in a significant way. And for I think there does seem to be some reaction of, hey, good for Tennessee, good for Josh Heupel, letting him go. Well, you had to have a plan to replace him anyway. You're just doing it a year early. And that's very different than the NFL.
Yeah, and we'll see what Tennessee does to replace him too, because Nico's a good quarterback. It's not impossible that Tennessee ends up with an equally good quarterback after all this, right? So to what end does a player in Nico's position even have leverage at all, really? If a team can just replace him, just reallocate. I guess that's the one thing. I would assume they're not reallocating funds because I don't think they're going to get the money back from Nico that they paid him.
Oh yeah.
So I guess it would only apply to a certain handful of programs that might have the funds to suffer that blow and then throw money at another quarterback. But I think where Nico ends up, and it sounds like North Carolina, people are predicting North Carolina. I see that. And what Tennessee does to replace him is still the other bit of data we need to see whether or not I think this is any sort of transformative action by a player, because he could just very well end up being a cautionary tale. I'm not saying he definitely will be, but he certainly could be.
Hold that thought for 1 second. There's one more point I want to make first. The other part of this, I think, is when you have this kind of thing happen in the NFL, it is very easy to cast the rich owners as villains. Nobody says, I love my owner. It can be very frustrating at the NCAA level that people are like, oh, the NCAA. Well, actually, the NCAA is just the collection of the schools. The schools are the NCAA. But there's nobody to hate at your school. You can love an NFL team and hate your owner. I'm not sure if you love your college football team, who you would hate in a situation like this. The person in charge of the NIL collective? There's no villain. And so I think that also because public perception is going to matter in this, right? The NCAA is a villain, but this is not Nico versus the NCAA. Players getting compensated, that big picture argument is versus the NCAA and versus the status quo. But the individual, it's hard to find the villain in the individual instance, which I think affects the view of this. And the view of this, I think, affects what's actually going to potentially happen.
Yeah, the ambiguity of the market, I think, affects it too. Because even in the NFL, I think in the situation of an NFL player holdout, it is possible, if not likely, that the player will carry some favor based off what the market says. Like if, for instance, I don't know, Josh Allen wants to hold out because he's not making as much money as Patrick Mahomes, and maybe he makes more. I actually don't know. I'm just using him as an example. There are at least market indicators of what a very good quarterback is worth in the NFL, and we're still figuring that out in college. I know $4 million has been thrown out there for Carson Beck at Miami, and the number that Darian Mensah got to go to Duke was allegedly quite big, I think north of $3 million, that kind of stuff. But without that information being out there concretely, and also even where it's coming from, how much of it is endorsements, how much of it is actually money from the school, all that kind of stuff, all the player I think is going to look like is greedy, unfortunately, when they're kind of operating in a gray area of what the actual market is for their position and their talent level.
So do you think this is a line in the sand? This is a transformative moment, or do you think it's a one-off? Because the last transformative moment we had, I think, turned out to be a one-off because Matthew Sluka left UNLV in the middle of the season and Haj Malik Williams came in and was better and nobody cared. And for a day, the day it happened, was there not the vibe? This is it. Here we go. And then it mattered for the football, zero.
Right.
So I think this maybe is not transformative because the system is changing and needs to change. But this could be, as you said, just an individual player / family that got out over their skis and he's good. But what if Tennessee replaces him fine? And what if he goes to another school and is good, but doesn't necessarily lead them to the playoff? I'm not sure that everybody's going to say, oh, I want to be the next Nico.
I don't think it's transformative.
Okay.
I think it's a one-off situation where people were like running the show who shouldn't have been. Like, I think if Nico had professional representation, this wouldn't have happened. At least not as ugly as it did. So, and I think more and more players are getting that. So I think the day could come where there's a larger movement involving a group of players, sure. But I don't know that this is going to set off some dominoes that's going to be all that transformational.
Do you think some people are viewing it as transformational, though? This is all anybody's talking about in college football.
Yes, but I also think there's always when things like this happen, that frankly have never happened before.
Yeah.
At least on the media side, it does seem like there's a desire for it to be transformational, as opposed to just like kind of letting it play out and see what happens. It's not to say you don't talk about it and wonder about the ramifications of it. But I would not speak in absolutes about it, because how could you know? So, but my hunch is that it's not going to be, because of sort of how ugly this got. I would have I feel like I would be better equipped to answer that in a couple of months when we see what shakes out on Tennessee's end and ultimately what happens for Nico. But
yeah,
there's people theorizing that Nico might go to G5 level now. And like, if that's the case, I'm like, was that worth it? And other players are looking at that. It's like, I don't know if that's the template you want to follow if you're a player in Nico's footsteps down the road.
Yeah, and we're getting some comments in the chat like he wasn't that good. His stats against the Power Four were not that good last year. We ran through all of those when we were breaking down Ohio State, Tennessee going into that game. It was like, that's all real. He put up huge numbers against lesser teams. He was the number 2 recruit in his class. He's certainly a very talented player. He's far from a finished product. And also the point in the chat that Sluka, the situation at UNLV when Sluka left in the middle of last year was allegedly he was not given or not paid what he was promised. It feels like from the reporting, the Iamaleava wanting more than it's not that Tennessee didn't come through. It's that the market changed and he wanted more, which would be more a traditional holdout. Again, we haven't seen that before. We just haven't seen it in college. So,
yeah.
So who should take him? Would you have any hesitation if you thought he will make my team better, maybe significantly better? Would you have any hesitation because of the way it happened?
It depends. Like, it's circumstantial for me. Like, if I'm an Ohio State, Oregon, Notre Dame that has a locker room full of players who are already making a ton of money, I don't think I would do it. If you're a program that is not on that tier, but could muster the financial means somehow to get him and let him elevate you, I think I would. Now, I don't know, like, from the northern perspective, I don't like Maryland. Maybe.
Okay, we're playing Name That School. All right, You went first. You started with Maryland. Make the case.
It's an offense that has I think proven that it can be quite good with the right quarterback, right? Like Taulia Tagovailoa was elevated, like got a larger national profile maybe than he would have otherwise by being in Mike Locksley's offense. I think Nico Iamaleava is a better player than that. That could really, really take Maryland's offense to another level, because they're going to surround them with good skill too. Like Maryland doesn't have a problem getting skill. And it sometimes is a problem getting good quarterback play, and Nico would be something unlike what they've had, and it would also then be like a bridge for a year or two too. They just got that kid in this class, Malik Washington, is that his name?
Yes. Big recruit, 4-star quarterback.
Big recruit. So like, you can do the transfer thing any number of ways, but it's a heck of a talent to put in your offense if you were able to swing it.
All right, so Maryland was on my list. Plus, there's so much uncertainty at Maryland right now. The AD left, the head basketball coach left. Oh, they feel like they made a good hire with Buzz Williams. Mike Locksley in Maryland did not have a great year last year. It feels like Mike Locksley might be in take a swing mode, although the AD, who did not seem to like him, is gone. So Mike Locksley also might be in dancing in the streets mode.
Yeah,
but I could see it. And Mike Locksley's a quarterback guy, and Mike Locksley, I could see being able to navigate the uncertainty and saying, listen, I don't care what happened before. We're going to put Nico in a position to succeed. And I think the Maryland fan base would accept that. And again, Maryland with the Under Armour stuff, like this could maybe be, they might be able to get some stuff together there to do a one-off and say, okay, this isn't normally how we do NIL, but we'll pay to get this guy. Or if it really works, now you've energized. I think Maryland could be really good. How about West Virginia? Have a Nico versus Nico quarterback battle. Be easy, right? Just go.
I thought about that. I don't know if Nico's the kind of runner that Rich Rod would want. Nico had 175 design rushing yards last year. He can move a little bit. He's also rail thin, and I wouldn't want him getting hit 10 to 15 times per game as a running back in the offense. So I'm not sure it's a fit exactly.
But also, I would believe in Rich Rodriguez and his ability to put him in the best position to succeed, even if he has to adapt a couple things. Yeah. And there's just not a ton of Northern teams that we feel like have quarterback uncertainty. In West Virginia, Nico Marchiol probably is ready to be good. Like, fine, good enough. They're not desperate. But, man, I also think West Virginia's been in a little bit of a weird spot, losing the basketball coach, firing the football coach. Could be an opportunity to jack up the fan base, and I don't know that they would get hung up on how we got here. All right, give me another team.
Syracuse is one I had. They just named Ricky
Also
Collins a starter.
list.
Yeah, they just named Ricky Collins a starter. Ricky Collins has not played. Good recruiting pedigree, has not played. Syracuse showed a financial ability to get someone like Kyle McCord 2 transfer cycles ago, I guess. So maybe they could put up something competitive for Nico. I'm not entirely sure. I'm also operating like if money's like not an issue, if we can like live in a hypothetical world where you can drum up the cash to do it. I think Syracuse would make sense as a probably like a perennial destination for transfer quarterbacks more often than not, if I had to guess.
So I had 4 teams on my list, and those are 3 of them. And my last one is Colorado. And Caden Salter is there, the expected starter. Juju Lewis is the freshman that they are building for the future.
Yep.
But certainly, I think Deion Sanders would be able to navigate this, and Deion Sanders would be able to create a situation where he would have his team welcome Nico, and he would push back against any negatives that are a part of it and be able to create an environment.
I don't know that I agree with that.
Really? I mean, it'd be more of a lightning rod, but
Cormani McClain out of the program for not handling his business. I actually don't think Deion would want someone who had Deion would want it. I don't think he would want a player who had such an ugly public renegotiation backfire on him into his program. No.
Okay. Because I do think he could handle it. I think he would be able to I'll be the lightning rod. If you have a problem with this, you come after me. Don't bother him. I talked to Nico and his family. I understand the situation. Everything's straight here. We're going to make him a great player.
I think Deion's old. I think he's too old school for that. I think Mario Cristobal said, if you're going to play hold out, you're going to play get out as it pertains to Miami. I think Deion Sanders would have a very similar mindset.
Deion play get out. Okay.
Yeah.
You're negging my Colorado choice. You got any more? I'm out then. I got no more for the North.
The only other one, again, can't imagine a world where they'd have the money for it, but I think they would take an upgraded quarterback if they could get it as Pitt.
Oh my gosh. I got Eli. It's been a
Wasn't Eli Holstein's first pass of the spring game picked off this week?
Okay. So, and Cade Bell would find a way, make it work, right? And Pat
Nico would like to
Narduzzi,
come the pit, throw the ball 45 times.
Yeah. And there's so many. I mean, it's just Johnny Majors, but there's so many Pitt, Tennessee connections already. It's like it's their little sister schools, North and South.
The thing that worries me more from the northern perspective as it pertains to Nico is who Tennessee is going to start sniffing around. I'm worried for Kansas State and Iowa State.
No. What?
Gird your loins.
What? I'm
Maybe
girding my loins?
Maybe
No.
Kansas.
No. You're spring portaling Jalen Daniels, Avery Johnson, or Rocco, but now I'm fired. Oh my God. Okay, now it's war. Okay, hats are on, swords are out. No,
because that's not Nico's not going to. We can throw these teams out as hypotheticals that might make sense. I know it was pointed out in the comments, and like I saw Pete Nakos on 3 reported it. It's like UCLA, Tulane, and UNC are like the teams for Nico. So I don't think anything about Nico potentially coming to the North is realistic. But I think Tennessee, which can't take an SEC transfer at this point in the calendar because of conference rules, could very well come after a Northern team's quarterback.
All right, stay back. Don't let your problem lead to a bigger problem, because you're going to have a problem. Now, but our fine northern fellas, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that. Why are you doing this? Okay. All right.
You don't think they do that?
My sword. I'm sleeping with my sword now.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where your head went? That's where your head went?
Rocco Beck, would you like $2.5 million? Yeah, that's yes.
To go down to that mess where they can't even keep their quarterbacks happy. Man.
But they can't. Like Hendon Hooker would have been a first-round pick if he didn't get hurt, and they convinced the world that Joe Milton was good. Not smart football fans, but the NFL
convinced the Cowboys. Yeah. Okay. That is not where now. So the next show is which Northern quarterback will now be swiped by Tennessee in Bill's nightmares. Okay. I'm sleeping with my swords. Head on a swivel. Keep your head on a swivel. Wednesday, we are going to talk about quarterbacks. We think that's the plan. We're going to talk about we're not just going off the spring games, but certainly like CJ Carr looking good in the Notre Dame spring game was very, very interesting. We continued to be very, very interested in what's happening with Bryce Underwood as a true freshman at Michigan. So we're gonna dive in on some quarterback stuff, perhaps around Underwood and true freshmen and this kind of situation. But it also might just give us a chance to be able to check in a little bit on some other quarterback situations, which we needed to do periodically, especially to make sure they're locked down now that you have the Hounds, the Tennessee Hounds are sniffing around the North. Head on a swivel. Why? Yeah. We almost made it. Hour 42 in. Now I have a knot in my stomach. I don't want to see Avery Johnson in orange. You're not doing that.
I'm just trying to get Dylan Raiola in Tennessee.
What? All right, this is it. College football's dead as we know it. All right, I was like, we're like, no, it's a one-off. It's fine. And now you have everyone. See, my voice went up there because this is worthy. Which Northern quarterback's going to get stolen? That makes my voice go up. All right, thanks to you guys for being here. Again, 2 things about this show. We're grateful that you're here, and we are doing everything we possibly can to bring you the best college football show from a Northern viewpoint that we can. And that's all we're going to keep doing. That's all we're focused on. And we are so happy that we have the opportunity to do that, not for you guys, but with you guys, because we're in this with you. You guys know ball just as much as we do. And we know that you care about Northern football just as much as we do. So we're just honored that you have chosen to be here with us. So much thanks to our great producer, Mike Urostowski. All the new looks, we think we elevated. My lights are better. Everything's sharp. Everything's looking good. And we couldn't have done it without Mike. So thanks to all his great work on this. And we will see you Wednesday, locked back in on Wednesday through this offseason. So you will find us noon Eastern if you want to be here live on YouTube, Mondays and Wednesdays. So we'll see you in 2 days. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.